Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the George W. Norris Legislative Chamber for the 13th day of the 108th Legislature, first session. Our chaplain for today is Senator Halloran. Please rise.
Good morning, colleagues. Please join me in an attitude of prayer. Heavenly Father, we are grateful to you for the many blessings you have granted us. We are thankful to you. You have blessed us to live in a country and state which honors and protects our liberties and freedoms, which you have granted us, among others, the freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition, and freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. Thank you for the liberty to offer you prayer in this assembly. Foremost, thank you, Heavenly Father, for your Son, our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen.
I recognize Senator Clemens for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I call to order the 13th day of the 108th Legislature for special session. Senators, please record your presence. Roll call. Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's quorum present, Mr. President.
Are there any corrections for the journal?
I have no corrections this morning, sir.
Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
There are, Mr. President. Your Committee on Enrollment and Review reports Legislative Bill 34 to select file with E&R amendments. That's all I have at this time.
Please proceed to the agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 3 introduced by Senator Clements. First of all, priority motion. Senator Conrad moved to indefinitely postpone the bill pursuant to Rule 6, Section 3F.
Senator Clemens, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 3 is another bill that will help to fund LB 34, the property tax credit fund that we're increasing from $565 million to $750 million. And there will be an amendment following. A committee amendment varies from LB 3. It'll be AM 41. LB 3 with amendment, AM 41 was voted out of committee 9-0. You'll find the detailed information in the fiscal packet on pages 4 and 5. This is a separate bill from the appropriation bill LB2 because it allocates money in fiscal years 26 and 27. The appropriation budget bill only covers current biennium 24 and 25 ending next June 30th of 25. This will provide some funding past June 30th of 25. LB 34, the property tax credit bill, transfers money in 25, 26, and 27. So LB 3 uses some cash transfers and interest earnings in 25, 26, and 27 to help LB 34 be funded. LB 3 adds $22 million in 2025, $80 million in 2026, $71 million in 2027, plus it has an intent to transfer $200 million of cash reserve in 2027 if needed and if funds are available. AM 41 will transfer the interest earnings on 45 cash funds. Of 68 cash funds were recommended in the governor's recommendation. The committee passed on taking interest on 23 of them, so we're including 45 million in 45 funds interest in the amendment. Shown on page 5 of the booklet from fiscal, we excluded funds where the interest is used in an agency budget and to make sure the funds that we're taking interest from are sustainable so that we wouldn't have an agency running out of money. So we did do a in-depth look at these funds to make sure that the interest, using the interest on the funds was not going to hurt that fund and that agency. The 2024 interest was $22.9 million. My figures assume a level $23 million in the future, but small differences will easily be absorbed in the budget. LB 3 and AM 41 covers most of the difference needed to fund LB 34, the property tax credit transfer. So we need 46 million in 2025, covered by 540 million on the green sheet. In other words, we're just a little bit short in the first year of the 750 million. We're coming up with 704 million in LB2 and LB3. The $46 million additional will be just taken out of the 504 million that we have excess reserves. So there is going to be funding there. Then combination of LB2 and 3 will just need $10 million in 2026. We usually lapse about $90 million of unspent funds. And so it's likely that we won't have to have any other appropriations for that. And in 2027, it's projected that we would need $22 million to complete the $808 million of property tax credit in the third year. And again, usual and customary lapses will likely cover that amount. So the combination of LB2 and LB3 is going to assure that the increases in the property tax credit will be funded in these next 3 years and increase the property tax credit and fund the increases that are in LB 34. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to open on the priority motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. I'd like to just make a few quick points, just to reaffirm and reiterate the unnecessary nature of moving LB2 and 3 forward at this juncture, in particular of the special session. Yes, of course, we can make budgetary adjustments during a special session, and we have historically, but I think it's also worth repeating. We've done that when we were in a period of economic distress and crisis, not a time of economic prosperity. Additionally, I have some concerns about the grab of interest and otherwise from certain dedicated funds like the Environmental Trust in particular. I also have general concerns with LB3 as introduced. I know the committee had tried to clean up some of the potential legal issues from what I can glean on the committee statement. But the law is clear. The legislature has the lone and sole ability to tax, the power of taxation, and any sort of effort to allow agencies in the executive branch to utilize a greater flexibility or ability to raise and increase fees outside of regulation purposes for purposes of raising revenue, i.e. taxation, could potentially amount to an unlawful delegation, and I wanted to put that on the record. Additionally, LB3 is not an A bill for LB 34. We can easily make these budget adjustments moving forward in a few months together next year as part of a broader comprehensive approach to our traditional budgeting structure. I think it's also important to note there is some potentially concerning language. It's intent language only, but nevertheless, it does have some guardrails on it, but it does kind of raise a flag about additional raids on the cash reserve in the future, which would be fiscally irresponsible. And I think the bigger story that's untold is part of LB2 and in part of LB3, particularly now that they're unmoored from the property tax plan that's now part of LB 34, is that this rush to grab cash funds, to sweep, to raid, to grab interest and otherwise, it's not to support additional property tax relief, but it shows that we're on an unsustainable path, as has already been charted by our neighbors in Kansas, and should be a cautionary tale rather than something to run down a road towards. The fiscal irresponsibility of many significant decisions this body has made in recent years in regards to spending and taxation has caused this pressure to utilize budgetary tricks to meet the bottom line. With that, Mr. President, I'd like to withdraw the motion.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Legislative Bill 3, introduced by Senator Clements at the request of the governor. It's a bill for an act relating to funds. provides for changes and eliminates fund transfers, creates a fund to provide, change, and eliminate fees, provides powers and duties, changes the use of certain funds and the investment earnings of certain funds, eliminates obsolete provisions, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, declares emergency. Bill is read for the first time on July 25th of this year and referred to the Appropriations Committee. That committee placed the bill on general file with committee amendments, Mr. President.
Senator Clemens, you're recognized to open on the committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have already did discuss the amendment somewhat, but I want to do a review. If you're wanting to see some details about it, the fiscal booklet, page 4 and page 5, shows the details. On page 5, there are 45 cash funds where the interest will be transferred to the general fund to help fund the property tax bill. And as I said before, the governor's recommendation had 68 funds that he proposed to take the funding out of. The one-page worksheet I sent out showed that that the interest was going to be about $31 million a year. The governor's proposal, the committee came up with funds that add up to $23 million a year. So we did take about a 25% reduction of the amount, but kept 75% of the dollar amounts. But a number of the ones that we did not transfer, we're making sure that agencies wouldn't get hurt because they were needing to use that interest. We had behavioral health housing. We didn't do that. Homeless shelter assistance. We didn't do that. There's in corrections, vocational life skills and prison overcrowding funds. We exempted those, excluded those. State Patrol, Public Safety Fund, we excluded that. And there was a number of housing funds, affordable housing, middle income, rural housing. Also, those were not included in the amendment. So I think the committee did a good job. And I want to thank the Appropriations Committee because we had to review 68 funds. And everybody got a chance one at a time to look at them and review whether that was money that was available to transfer or not. And I think we have come up with funding that will help the property tax bill be funded, but not hurt any individual agency that has a cash fund. And so the AM 41, I would appreciate your green vote and welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Conrad moved to recommit the bill to the Appropriations Committee, but I have a note that she would withdraw.
Senator Conrad, you're recognized to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. My plan is to remove all of my motions on the measures so that we can have a debate and up and down votes on critical issues like the amendment Senator Bosselman brought forward and move forward with our work expeditiously. So I would ask that we dispose of these motions as quickly as possible so that we can attend to our work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Conrad. Senator Vargas, you're recognized to speak.
Anyone can.
Okay, sorry, I was just waiting. I thought Senator Wayne objected. I want to just weigh in really quick. LB3, and if you didn't hear what Senator Clements mentioned, this actually will help with the out years. 70% of the out year balance needed for what is currently in LB34 is coming from this. Some of it is the interest from cash fund transfers. Some of it is transfers themselves. Then there is a CRF language that's intent language. So this, while neither one of them are necessary to do LB34, this makes sure it is balanced in the out years on its own. And so I wanted to make sure that that was very clear because it represents about 80 million and then 80 million in 25, 26 and 70 million in 26, 27, which represents these about 70%, 75% of the out year balance for that biennium for this. We have enough on the green sheet right now with or without what we did yesterday to be able to fill in what is needed for LB34. But this does provide a better structural balance for the two out years here in the next biennium. So I wanted to make sure that was clear. We reduced or took away the ones that were the most harmful. We focused on the ones that were building up a little bit more cash fund interest, and the interest ongoing of that 22 million is going to be ongoing going into the general fund. So that should help us a little bit more fiscal solvency. So I supported this in committee as well, and will support this on the floor. Ask your green vote for LB3.
Thank you, Senator Vargas. Senator McKinney, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I support the recommit to committee, and I don't support LB3. I try to wake up in a good mood and leave in a good mood, but I get back here and realize I can't be in a good mood because this body continues to do things that I've deem as just irresponsible and overlooks the people that we supposed to be taking care of. So when the Appropriations Committee decides to take money from the Correctional Facility Cash Fund, I wonder if they ask questions in committee from the department about whether or not they are taking care of the facilities, because the Nebraska State Penitentiary has a water main problem currently, and I believe they're without water right now, and they need to fix it. So why are we taking money away? We should be fixing the problems we currently have and using the interest money to take care of the problem. So we don't need to move this money because we have issues currently that need to be solved. So I don't understand why we're taking money from the Correctional Facility Cash Fund, whether or not it's interest or not. We have issues in our facilities, not even just in NSP. We also have issues in the York Women's Prison that need to be taken care of. I don't understand this. I would also like to know, what is the Universal Service Fund used for? Why is money being taken away from that? Whether it's interest payments or not, I would like to know what the Universal Service Fund is used for, and why are we taking interest money away from it? We're also taking the money away from correctional industries, interest money, off the backs of the men and women that are currently without water or have poor water in a facility. So not only are we not taking care of them, making sure they got an adequate water supply, we're taking money that was made off their backs because we don't pay them minimum wage. We pay them slave wages because according to the 13th Amendment, we could pay them as slaves, which is sad that in 2024, we still consider people that are incarcerated as slaves. So my issue overall is, why are we taking this money? Why aren't we taking care of the problems we currently have? Because although the money might be sitting there, we have issues. We shouldn't have moved the 10 million because they could reallocate that 10 million to take care of the water main problem that is still persistent every year. That new prison is not going to be built tomorrow, next year, or the year after. So you have to take care of the water main issue that keep happening. But Supposedly, there's just 10 million for operations just sitting there. Why can't we reallocate it to fix the water main issue? Why do men in the pen have to use porta potties and have to use water bottles for their water supply? Why can't we, well, I know why, because the state, I believe, intentionally deferred maintenance for 10 plus years on the state penitentiary to justify building a new prison. Because if you look at the documents that I shared a year or two ago, you would see that there was requests to fix the water main 10 plus years ago, and it never happened. So why are we moving this money? So I'm hopeful somebody from the Appropriations Committee can explain to me and justify why we're moving this money, the 10 million and this money from the Correctional Facilities Cash Fund, when we have all these issues in our prisons, in the NSP and in the York Women's Prison around water. Whether it's interest payments or not, interest money or not, we got issues around water that need to be solved. And you're also taking money off the backs of these people, and you're not even taking care of their well-beings, and it's disrespectful. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Right. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I'll be introducing amendments to strike each section by section. We'll be here for a little bit. So I was flipping through the channels last night, and it just so happened a great show came on from the 80s called Goonies. And I feel like Senator Erdman, Senator Holleran, Senator Bosselman, Senator Linehan, Albright, Lowe, Brandt, Brewer, McDonald, just kind of looking in my class and see who was around. I feel like we're at that defining moment where they're underneath and they're tired and they're struggling and they're walking through the caves, and Troy's buckets comes down. And it's this bucket up where the people are above this cave or this cave, and they could be saved. And Mikey, in his infamous speech, says basically, it's their time up there, but it's our time down here. It's our time down here, and that all goes away if we go up Troy's bucket. And I feel like that's where we are. We are at a crossroads where we're tired, we want to go home, we're not really getting anything accomplished, and we think we should just take the ride up the bucket. And the bucket is LB 34. For those who don't know, we are only offering an additional $180 million of new property tax relief. We had a special session to offer $185 million in new property tax relief. That's not going to go to the family farm. And if it does, it's 14, 15 cents, maybe $1. But that same property tax credit is going to go to these major corporations, which we have an opportunity to say no, but we're not doing it. We are spending a lot of money in a special session. It's going to cost us $1 million to implement this new property tax program to offer $185 million. And we're okay with that. And over at least a quarter, if not 40% of Nebraskans will feel no relief. There's nothing for renters. Homestead is not expanding. Senator McDonald has a bill to at least keep some changes to how we make changes to Homestead. We're not having that conversation to make sure our Homestead exemption stays up with the actual cost of what's going on. We're not having that conversation. We're all being driven by a schedule to fail. There's nothing special going on in this special session. And so I'm more disappointed than I am anything else that we're not really trying to fix the problem. We're kicking the can down the road. And we're going to hope some elections come some certain way that we'll have a different thing to talk about next session, but we won't. We're going to continue to kick the can down the road instead of giving direct property tax relief to the people who need it. and helping those who maybe don't own property but are being priced out of affordable rentals. And at some point, we got to have the courage. Everybody's sitting, having conversations, looking at their laptops, because nobody really wants to do the work. Nobody really wants to have the conversation. So I'm going to start calling on people on this floor. So I'm giving everybody a warning. And I'm going to ask them directly, is $185 million what you came down here to do for special session? And you're going to have to tell on the mic, that's going to be in the transcripts forever, why that's okay for your district. Why it's okay to leave out the renters. Why it's okay to only help Ted Turner and Bill Gates and other multi-billionaires who don't live in Nebraska get tax credits. So, fair warning, if I call on you, don't think it's a surprise. We're gonna have a long conversation about if coming down here for a special session is enough for that. And don't give me this crap of we didn't have the votes or whatever. No, we are sticking to a schedule of failure so we can get out of here so people can go. People can go out of town. So we're gonna have all those conversations, and I'm gonna ask you directly if you're willing to stay. If you want to truly cut property tax, then we need to reject what we're doing right now and get to the drawing board. It isn't like we haven't done this multiple times. And you can tell your constituents why you're too damn scared to make a difference. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to address Senator McKinney's objection on the Correctional Services Cash Fund. That fund, let's see here. In your booklet, it shows that there was $101,000 of interest in fiscal year 24. And looking at the history of it, it received it was 11 million, then it was 23 million in 23, and it was $18 million of revenue in it. And they spend 14, 15, or $20 million a year. And the balance currently is $12.5 million. And so the revenues that are coming in, they are spending them, but they're not spending the interest. The $100,000 isn't going to, we're not taking $10 million away, we're taking $100,000 away of the fund that has annual revenue that comes in regularly and will be sustainable with just taking 100,000 out. They're getting in $18.5 million spending. Well, this year they spent $15.5 million, and so they're actually didn't spend all of the money that came in. So the interest, that's why we left this one in. And I wanted to just point out also that it's not in your booklet, but it's in my notes that we did not take any interest from the vocational life skills program in corrections. We did not take any interest from the prison overcrowding contingency fund in corrections. So we were looking into not hurting important programs. And in my opinion, we have not hurt the Correctional Services Cash Fund, just taking the interest. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator McKinney, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I would disagree. I mean, you are taking $10 million in LB2 from operations, which will hurt the prisons. And regardless of if it's 100,000 or not, any money that's being taken away from correctional facilities, and we have water main issues today where men don't have adequate water supplies, is harmful. Why aren't we requiring them to spend down those dollars today to make sure that the water main is fixed today. That's my issue. And Senator Clemens, would you answer a question, please?
Senator Clemens, would you yield?
Yes.
Could you tell me what is the Universal Service Fund used for?
Universal Service Fund the money comes from fees on telephone bills, and it's used to build out telephone service in rural areas where it's not profitable for a company to do it themselves. It helps companies to reach out to remote areas, gives them a subsidy so that they will build out into other areas of the state.
How much are you taking from that?
We're taking about $2 million of the interest on it. It has $133 million in the fund, and this would only, and it's been growing. It gets $50 million in per year in fees, and we're taking $2 million of the interest, approximately $2 million a year, but it has 133 in it now.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yep. That's interesting. Wow, $2 million. Bad cell phone service in rural Nebraska. I think it's also interesting that, especially now that we're taking money from the State Visitor Promotion Fund, although it's interest, I think we need to do a lot of investment in state visitor promotion to attract people to the state of Nebraska, because 1 minute we was not for everybody, and now it doesn't seem like we're gonna be doing a whole lot of retainment of talent or people at the route we're going. But back on the topic of just corrections, I don't know if anyone's listening, but currently there's a water main issue at the Nebraska State Penitentiary. The Appropriations Committee decided to vote to take $10 million from operations because, for whatever reason, the department said they saved some money and they didn't need $10 million for operations. But what they do need $10 million for is a water main issue that seems to happen every year. There's a water main issue since I've been in this body. Why aren't they fixing it? The new prison will not be online next year or the year after or the year after or the year after. So why aren't we fixing this problem? Because every year the men in that facility have to use porta potties. They have to use buckets to scoop the toilets to drain the toilets. Their own feces just to drain the toilets. They got to live in inhumane conditions because the department and this body won't force the department to do the right thing. It happened with Frakes and it's currently happening today. They should be fixing the water main issue. We should use that $10 million and appropriations should be asking those questions and forcing them to fix the water main. But we're not. We're just reallocating the dollars, telling people we're solving their property tax issues, but we're really not, because the department is going to need that $10 million sometime in the future. So it's just a temporary fix because they're going to come back for that $10 million. So it's really just a loan to the taxpayers with no interest. So thank you. I'll get back on the mic, but I'll continue. I think a lot of people in here should be looking at these cash fund transfers. Just ignoring them just doesn't make any sense to me, because it's a lot of questions we could be asking and just letting them slide. It makes no sense to me. Universal Service Fund, Revenue Enforcement Cash Fund.
That's your time, Senator.
All right.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Hansen, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was hoping he brought up Goonies, and so I got to go with this. I can't let that one go. I was hoping Senator Wayne would be able to yield to a question, please.
Senator Wayne, would you yield to questions?
Yes.
So you just watched the movie recently. Do you remember a character on Goonies? I believe his name was Chester Copperpot. Do you remember who that was?
I don't remember who it was, but I remember yes, I remember the reference multiple times. Chester Catapult is the way the little, yes.
Okay, thank you. I mentioned that Chester Copperpot was actually the guy in the Goonies they referenced multiple times as the guy who actually found the cave to lead to One-Eyed Willie's treasure, and he went and explored it. But unfortunately, a giant boulder landed on him and he died right away. The Goonies eventually find him, and he's been laying there for a long time. And so Senator Wayne references the legislature as kind of like the Goonies, when actually we have been Chester Copperpot year after year after year. We've tried to go anywhere with property taxes, but we keep dying every time, and nothing gets done. This year, however, and I will agree with Senator Wayne here on this one, that we did not get anywhere close to where I would like to be. However, like the Goonies, we made it to the well. I think that's where our journey stops. We made it to the well, and we find just a small little treasure of coins on there, and we think we won. But we'd had just a small victory so far. A lot more needs to be done. And this is where I would disagree with Senator Wayne, is that he mentions the 1107 tax credits as really the only thing that got accomplished. The 1107 tax credits do something, and we are contributing more to that, which is significant. It's not small potatoes. But we also put caps on spending on cities and counties, and I think that is very significant. The whole idea is trying to address the problem of high property taxes. And this is something I mentioned at the beginning of the session, why we have them to begin with, and trying to address the actual problems of why we have high property taxes in the state of Nebraska, instead of putting a Band-Aid over it, even though right now it seems like a Band-Aid. But that is something I know Senator Breezy, others, throughout all the years I've been here, is at least try to establish some sort of guardrails on spending for property tax authorities. And we did accomplish that this year. I think that's pretty significant. That will hopefully help address, not just now, but future years down the road, on people's property tax statements, and hopefully controlling the ability for them to go up higher and higher and higher without us having to kind of keep coming back year after year trying to put another Band-Aid on it. So I think that is pretty significant. Now, could more be done? Yeah, I think so. And the 1107 property tax credits, I know Senator Wayne mentions that it's for millionaires and people out of state, but I guarantee you that people who are out of state who own property in the state of Nebraska, they have a CPA, and that CPA knows about that tax credit. Who I think more likely maybe not does not know about the property tax credit, perhaps those who cannot afford to hire a CPA. This is who it helps. Those are the people where it gets front loaded and they automatically get it now, where perhaps they couldn't afford a CPA or they didn't know about it, and now they're going to get it. So I think that helps everyone in every district. However, possibly those who are more in a low-income district. So those are significant steps we made. Again, we haven't found the treasure at the end of the cave, that's for sure. But we did make it to the well. There's a lot more work that needs to be done. Hopefully, maybe we can accomplish a little bit more yet this special session. But if not, we got a hell of a lot more work to do next year in 4 months. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hansen. Senator Jacobson, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to follow up on what Senator Hansen just mentioned. We like to talk about the millionaires and the billionaires and that live outside the state of Nebraska and own property in Nebraska, and all of our problems are based upon that, and they aren't, okay? So let's just keep in mind that if you're from out of state and you own land in Nebraska, you do pay property taxes, okay? And if we're able to bring property tax rates down, yes, they would get a lower benefit as well. That's part of what is in the United States Constitution that would require us to do that. We would still be on par or still above most every other state in terms of our property taxes, okay? I think my mom used to say, had a phrase, don't cut off your nose to spite your face. And it seems like that's what we're trying to do here, is we want to go, we just so badly want to get after the boogeyman, which is the out-of-state companies, that we want to damage everyone else and forget about the people that are trying to hang on and staying in their homes in Nebraska because the property taxes are too high, because we're going to change the narrative and make it sound like it's out-of-state property owners. Out-of-state property owners, guess what? If they own property, they rent that land or they produce income from that land, and they pay Nebraska state income taxes and they file a Nebraska state tax return. And guess what? They also claim the 1107 tax credit. So by taking the 1107 tax credit and front loading it, it does not change the amount of money they're going to receive. It does not change the money they're going to receive. We're not stopping the bad guys, the boogeyman. We're just not doing it, okay? It's a false narrative. I wish people would quit saying it. Am I disappointed with where we're at? You bet I am. You bet I'm disappointed. I spent all summer last summer meeting with a group of bipartisan senators in this body to come up with the backbone of this plan. And what's most disappointing are the senators that were on the working group that were on board with the direction we were going and then voted against the bill. We talk about we should have more in this bill. Yes, we should. That's why I said from the beginning, let's amend the bill. If you don't like the bill the way it is, if you didn't like LB1, you didn't like LB9, you didn't like LB34, then amend it. No amendments came. All we got were more priority motions to delay and filibuster and make everybody vote up or down on the bill that was in front of us. That's not genuine interest in reducing property taxes. Then we heard the narrative about we're going to raise everybody's sales tax and the low income are going to be adversely affected. Again, completely false narrative. And I would encourage anyone to go look at the list and go look at the spreadsheets that Senator Von Gillern laid out that showed how low income people would be impacted, low income homeowners would be impacted. And it's a false narrative. They're the ones who benefit. They would have benefited from what was in LB1 and LB9 and the original LB34. But it's better to just divert attention, go tell the public things that aren't true, and cave to the lobby who were out there also running ads that were false, instead of doing what we came down here to do, which was to provide real property tax relief to everyday Nebraskans who are trying to stay in their homes, and farmers and ranchers who are trying to hang on to their farms and their ranches, when we all agree
1 minute
that property taxes are out of control. At some point later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about why renters can benefit from what we're trying to do. And I would tell you the biggest problem for renters today, and reason rents are so high, it's a simple issue of supply and demand. We do not have enough housing units for the demand that's there. If you get more supply than we have demand, rates will indeed come down. It's a basic concept, very simple. I'll get on the mic later and talk to you about that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jake, I don't disagree with Senator Jacobson. Here's my problem. We spent 4 hours on the floor, and next thing I know, an amendment comes out that waters down everything. We weren't sitting here trying to fight. We weren't sitting here trying to do what's best for Nebraska. We didn't even go 8 hours before a negotiation caved in. That's what the public needs to know. I'm not worried about whatever false narratives both sides are saying. But here's the reality. 185 million, 3% of our property taxes. That's what we're going to help out on. And I'm asking the body, even if you do the 3%, how about you do the 3% in a targeted approach? How about you give the credit to people who actually need it? But we can't have that conversation. But here's the problem. I'm filing a lot of amendments on all these bills, and we're going to take votes. We're going to take votes today on Senator Blood's bill coming to the floor, because I can reorder the speaker's agenda and have that vote, because it's already on this bill. We're going to take a lot of votes about reordering the agenda. And here's what's happening to the public, so you guys know who are watching. There were bills introduced in other committees. The speaker has determined only revenue bills are coming to the floor. That's the ability of the speaker, but we won't even allow us to have a debate on rearranging the schedule. So now I got to go through regular order to have that debate, and we will multiple times. There was an exec session in urban affairs. A bill that was kicked out in regular session wasn't kicked out here because too many people feel like, well, don't matter anyway. I didn't know when I came down here my committee didn't matter. I didn't know when I came down here that I don't have the same opportunities as every other committee. You want to have a debate about 150 million recreational marijuana? Well, there's no point of us even execing, because the speaker's not going to allow it to the floor. And you know, the conversation going on right now on the floor is, I don't know if we should have a Brandt's LRCA come out, 2CA come out, because if that comes out, what if other bills start coming out? This is a dictatorship. Nebraskans, your voices aren't being heard. Your voices aren't being heard because the process won't allow your voice to be heard. The speaker has decided to silence you. There's a bill in urban affairs about taking a vote to the people. That has been silenced by this speaker. So Omaha, 500,000, your voice don't matter here today. Not when it comes to your projects and being able to vote on bonding this. The 81% of Nebraskans who like legal medical marijuana, the 60% who believe in recreational marijuana, your voices don't matter, because judiciary is not important enough in this committee anymore, because too many Dems are cutting deals with the speaker. Blood has a bill that has came out before any of these bills and won't be heard. And all you talk about property tax relief, that is the biggest constitutional amendment we probably should be debating, unfunded mandates. I didn't know when I signed up we had to be done by the 16th. Now, there are some people who have made commitments that as an organization they can't move because they can't be replaced at conferences. I understand that. That's why I offered a pause.
1 minute.
But we won't take a pause. This is 100% schedule to failure, and it falls directly on leadership. We had less than 24 hours for a call, and now when we come here, we're being silenced again. But we're okay with that. We're okay with that. And we're going to talk about schedule and a 4-day pause and everything else that we just did, how that could have been better utilized. We're going to walk through all of that. But people want to talk about the institution. What we are doing right now is a disservice to every Nebraskan. 3% property tax cut. That's a win. When we were 6 votes away from a 45% property tax cut.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Reapy, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to yield my time to Speaker Arch.
Speaker Arch, you have 4 minutes, 50 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to respond to some things because obviously I have become an issue in this debate. And here's what I have said from the very beginning. The Committee of Subject Matter Jurisdiction on this call is the Revenue Committee. That is why I have prioritized the Revenue Committee bills from the beginning. I made it clear this is what I was going to do. And then I also made it clear that when we are through with that, it is the will of this body. If you want to stay in session to consider other bills, let's go. Let's do that. But because there are no priority bills in a special session, somebody needs to set the priority, and unfortunately, it falls on the speaker. So I've done that. In my memo of July 24th, I indicated that in this special session, my goal is to allow the body to fully consider the issues of the call, which are property tax reductions for Nebraska and the identification of funds to achieve that policy. Unusual session, not a general session. It's a special session, specific to the call of the governor. Property tax relief. Subject matter jurisdiction committee. It's not that the other committees are unimportant. Unprecedented, about 4 times the number of bills introduced. They were all processed through committee, and they sit. And if the body chooses to stay in session, there is nothing preventing this body from doing that. All I am saying is, at the front end, we're going to be considering the Revenue Committee package, whatever that package is. And by the way, there have been some who say, like, I put my thumb on this. My thumb has only been on the process. What comes out of the Revenue Committee? We have seen discussion of LB1. We've seen discussion of LB9. We are now in discussion of LB34. So there's debate going on. There is discussion going on, both in committee and on the floor. My thumb has not been on the bill, but my thumb has been on the process, because my goal was to create that fair and efficient process of this session and not turn it into a session of everything coming to the floor, everything being debated on the floor. The committee process was very important. There will be an opportunity for Senator Wayne, for anybody, to decide, we want to stay in session, there is more work to do, let's stay here, let's continue. I'm here. I'll be here till whatever the end is. Makes no difference to me. But that's the process. We've had multiple opportunities to amend the bill on the floor. I mean, I know that there's a frustration like, well, my bill's not getting heard and my bill's not getting heard. That opportunity exists, and it will come at the end of when we have dealt with these 3 bills in particular, and we can stay. We can stay. It's not my decision. It's your decision. Legislature, it's your decision. If you agree with Senator Wayne, and some do, I have heard you come up and say, yeah, we need to do this. Great. Let's do it. Let's stay. But that'll be your choice, not mine. I'm simply wanting to deal with these revenue bills, the appropriation bills, because I believe that that Revenue Committee held the key to what we can get done in a package, and that had the best chance. So with that, the opportunity will come to do exactly what Senator Wayne is advocating for when we are completed dealing with these bills. And I know you can disagree with my process, you can disagree with me personally, but that's where we're left because we are in a special session. There are no priority bills. Somebody had to set the agenda. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Speaker Arch. Senator McKinney, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Wayne.
Senator Wayne, 4 minutes, 55 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator McKinney and Nebraskans. If you change the process, you change the outcomes of bills. Process influences how bills are actually done. We saw that in a debate on the floor where we took an unprecedented recess so they can gather their thoughts inside and come back out. We took a 4-day break, we took a 5-day break. We're taking breaks. That influences the process, and that definitely influences the outcome. The fact of the matter is to have the mindset that this is all a revenue special session, he doesn't get to determine that. And if it's all about revenue, why are we debating appropriations? The fact of the matter is, everything could have came out and had a real debate. And the fact that there is a whisper campaign saying we don't want to put other things on the floor because we're afraid other bills are going to come out, that is directly reflective of leadership. If you want to be a leader, then let the body agree with you. And there are plenty of votes that we could have taken to reorder the schedule. There are poll motions that are actually out there that you won't schedule. If you have that confidence in your leadership ability, then put those votes up, yes or no. And don't tell me it's going to take time, because you dictate what is fair in a fair debate. Nebraska, this has been a sham. There's no way the morning of, the clerk had a division already ready to go of that complicated of a bill. There has been a conspiracy from day one not to do any real relief around here. And what you're seeing play out, and when you get to these votes, you're going to see people who are voting, who claim they were against the bill, but voting for this bill. People who took time to filibuster who are in voting for the same bill. Because it's about the postcards. They ain't about real work. See, what people don't understand is if we pass this bill and pass the next bills, what they're going to say is we already did property tax relief, let's go home. They don't want to stay and actually do work for the working class and low income people. So again, they're being left out. We're not making a difference here today. And nobody can say we are. 3% that most taxpayers won't even know. And with the rising costs or the rise of market values, Senator Erdman is right. It is a little decrease in the increase. So we failed you again, Nebraskan, kicking the can down the road. And the Goonie speech that Senator Hansen, my dear friend, said is what they've been saying for the last 10 years that I've been down here. So close, no cigar. Can't help you out, my friend. We're not making a difference because we're just going to be sheep and go. So don't come up to me today with these private conversations saying you support that and you're right, we need to do something. Man up. Don't know the woman version. Woman up. I don't know what you say. And don't vote for cloture and send a message. Senator Blood's bill
1 minute.
has huge impact on property taxes, but he made the decision not to schedule it. Have you guys even heard what it is outside of government? It came out of government the first day. How many conservatives are on that committee? So clearly they thought it was a great idea. But the speaker says no. So Senator Armendariz doesn't even get to hear it. She has to go talk to somebody other conservative and say, wow, why'd you vote for that? What if that's a better idea that the Revenue Committee didn't think of because they're not on government committee? Stifling conversation stifles progress. And that's what we've been doing here when it comes to property tax. Selected few. And when those negotiations break down, we don't talk to anybody else, we give up.
That's your time, Senator. Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Senator Wayne is making several people in this room uncomfortable. I like it. Been here 8 years. Nothing has changed. When I came here, I discovered that the goal was not to fix the system. The goal was to continue on doing what we've always done. He's exactly right. The decrease in the increase, property tax is scheduled to go up $1 million a day, and we're going to additionally add 185 million, half a year. Most people's property tax is going to go up 10, 12, 15% this year. But we're going to give you relief of 3%. If that is not a decrease in the increase, tell me what is. We're not interested in fixing this system. We're not. 57 years we've been working on a three-legged stool. When I was a kid, we had a one-legged milk stool. You had to balance it. That was easier than having a three-legged stool like we have, because one side of it is way longer than the others. The issue we have in Nebraska is not just property tax. It's the system. It's the income tax, the inheritance tax, and all of those things that we do. So it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people in this room when Senator Wayne brings the truth and flushes everybody out that don't want to do anything about property tax. I, for one, never had any confidence at all that we would accomplish anything in this session. I stated that. In fact, here's what I stated before we ever did it. I said, what's going to happen is we're going to adopt a bill that front loads 1107, and we're going to put spending caps in place, and we're going to go home. I said that a long time ago. Guess what? When that passed, I got an email or a text that said, you were right. Now, how did I know that was going to happen? Because I've been here for 8 years. I've seen it. So it's not hard to predict something that you do over and over and over again and expect different results. You know what the definition of that is? Yeah. Insanity, some say. I think it's stupid. Senator Wayne seems to be a little upset. I agree with him. I understand that. So we, the class of 17 that's leaving, have tried in many ways to try to bring the attention to the rest of those who serve in this body that the system needs to be changed, that we need to make a difference in people's lives. We don't really give a rip about people. What we care about is the government. Because, we can't take money from the Legislative Council, that's us. We can't take money from this or that. So what happens when the economy turns down and the people don't have the money to pay their taxes? Oh, that's okay, because we force them to pay the taxes. Why don't we pass some kind of legislation that puts the taxpayer in first place? No. That would mean government would have to make a cut at something, maybe. Who elected you? The people or the government? And there's many of you in this room believe the government sent you here. That's not who sent you here. And so when we leave here, don't brag about the 3% reduction as a win. It's not a win. Senator Hansen, this is not a win. This is more of the same. Decrease in the increase. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator Clemens, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to respond to some comments about the corrections maintenance problems. We do know that the water system at the York Women's Facility had problems, and in the budget, we already earmarked $2 million to be able to have that repaired, and that will not come out of the corrections budget, or it was added in for corrections to use as an additional fund earmarked for them. Then other prison maintenance, I agree that the state prison is old and needing repairs regularly, and they are able to use what we call 309 funds, the 309 task forces, senators on a committee that recommend projects that total about $10 million worth of expenses per year that is outside, it would be outside the corrections budget, and corrections is able to apply for those funds also, in addition to what they have in their regular budget. Also, I agree that so that was an LB3 comment. Regarding comments that have been made on that, that we're not doing anything, we will be increasing our property tax credit funds by $450 million over 3 years. 185 million the first year, 131 million the second, 134 the third. I was also in support of much more than that, more like $500 million every year. And so I am disappointed also that we haven't done more, but I think the choice was between getting nothing or getting something, and $450 million over 3 years is something, and I hope we come back next session and do more. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator McDonald, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Had a meeting in Omaha this morning at 7 a.m. and as I was walking in, a couple people stopped me and asking how things are going and what we had been working on and where we are as of today. Explaining it to them. Their response was, "That's not enough. That's not enough. It's not enough." We have 81 bills that was introduced, 24 constitutional amendments. If the speaker tells me something, I believe it. But if the goal here as this body is to say, well, and I support LB3. Thank you, Senator Clements and the Appropriations Committee. I'm a member of for 8 years. The work you've done. I'm opposed to Senator Conrad's motion. And that's the way this place works. I'm not in agreement with everyone, and I won't be in agreement with those 81 bills that were introduced, which I have 8 of them. And I'm going to start talking about each one of them. And one of them, I have 7 of them, 1 constitutional amendment. But if the goal is, and it's already been decided, that once we pass LB 2, 3, and 34, we're going to sign and die, we're going to be done, then I'm done. I'm done supporting this. I think this is something, but as was told to me this morning, it's not enough. I want the bill scheduled. If the committees say, you know what, that doesn't fall within the call, I trust the committee. But we got to get some bills out here on the floor. Because again, this isn't enough. I've heard so many people say, we don't have time. We don't have time. That's all we have is time. The governor starts a special session, we end it. And I'm not trying to say that people don't have busy lives, things scheduled, and I understand that. And Senator Wayne has brought this up a number of times. We can pause. We can pause and work on other bills. We can work on other plans. We can try to compromise. This place is nothing but an institution that promotes compromise. Disagree with a number of you on the floor on a number of different issues, but I trust you. I trust you that you will try to compromise. We've got to take the personalities out of it. We got to get back to the policy. We got to say what's best for the citizens, east, west, north, south. Not just Legislative District 5, east, west, north, south. And I know we all have the ability to do that because I've seen all of you do it. I've been impressed with it over the 8 years. How much you're willing to set aside. And again, that old saying, you can have 100% of nothing or 50% of something, and you take the 50% because that's what's best for the state of Nebraska and the citizens at that point in time. Now, when you say, well, we'll come back next year and we'll work on this, my 8 years experience, you've got 90 days and you'll have 500 bills introduced and things will get so busy. That's the nature of this place. The time is now. The time is now to start concentrating on how we are going to fix and have true property tax relief. Senator Erdman, since 2018, our second year, has been talking about EPIC. Kick EPIC out and let's have a discussion for 8 hours potentially about EPIC. And at the end of the day, if you say that is just not a good idea, I understand. But make sure you're dealing with facts and you're making your decision on facts, and that's fine. But let's have that discussion. Let's have that discussion on Senator Blood's bill. Let's have it on Senator Brandt's bill. I want to have it on all 8 of mine. To understand that all 8 of mine are going to come out of committee. Let's start getting to work. And if there is scheduling issues, let's figure out when we are going to take a recess, when we're going to come back. But let's do the work, because right now the ball's in our court. It's not the governor's, and the people in Nebraska are counting on us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak, and this is your final time on the motion. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak for your third time on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. I mean, I'm having some great conversations, and part of the people are just asking, like, how does this work? How do we figure it out? And so here would be my request if people were seriously about doing something. We come back tomorrow. This is just me. This is just Justin talking crazy. We finish the bills today. Hopefully we kill one bill, because I think we have to kill that to really reset what we're doing down here. If people still see that on the board, LB 34, people are going to keep just going with the get along. We come back tomorrow, we check in, and we go to our committees. And we exec on our committees. I know appropriations is done, but revenue still has a lot of bills. Judiciary has bills. Education has bills. Kind of talk through it, what your committee is, kick some bills out. But then we have like a real negotiation where it isn't just 2 or 3 people, because this is so fluid that I feel like at the end of the day, we were 6 votes away, based off of what I can count, 6 votes away of 45% property tax relief. Were they a pretty hard 6 votes? Yeah. There were some people who drove some line in the sands on other areas. Yeah. But how it works is there are some people who may not like gambling at all. And if that person wants to run that card and figure out they can get 30 to put a constitutional amendment on, or 25, that's fine. The same people might be okay with another thing. So you might have 3 or 4 different bills working your way up. That is healthy. Because if you don't want to vote for gambling, don't vote for gambling. If you don't want to vote for this issue, don't vote for this issue. And you walk them in lockstep. And the commitment is, I'm going to give my best shot to get this through. And in final reading, if it dies, or select file, it dies, you can't pull off because you didn't get your win. It was your job for you to secure your votes to get your win. That's how you play this game down here. But we never had an opportunity. We had 24 hours to figure out how to deal with 6 votes. A group of us met on a Saturday and walked through things. We had a meeting with some other folks, and they were like, well, that was the only real one meeting that I had with a group of folks. See, what typically happens before a special session is all of that work that I just talked about was done before. But even the committee that's not secret but supposed to be secret couldn't come up with an actual report or idea or plan that they could agree on. In fact, the plan that was brought before us in LB1 wasn't the plan of the committee, nor did the committee even sign off on it. Then what the hell is the purpose of the committee? And what we have before us is a revenues bill that's a little different, which is fine because of the legislature. But typically we have some time to talk through things. Are there always bill drafting issues? Yes, because how you read a bill and how somebody else reads a bill typically differs, and you got to square that out. But that's why we have 3 rounds of debate. The process was flawed this time. We can set a reset or not, and the reset is a pause. Everybody take a couple of days off, get re-energized, watch Goonies, watch Dirty Dancing, watch all those great shows, come back, and be able to go. The problem is, my logic is correct. And now you're struggling with challenging the speaker or not. Well, you get to vote on the speakership next year. Challenging him this year has no carryover effect. It just doesn't. He's going to need your vote again next year. That's how it works. He can't be too mad at you all the way through and then I expect you to vote for him. So you'll work that out. People get over that. But I'm really saying we need to put a pause and really do something. 6 votes away from 45%, and you're telling me we couldn't figure it out. One of the biggest champions against some bills yesterday, I had a great conversation with and found out they were movable on some issues. Never had that conversation before. We can do better, and I'm just asking people to stand up for your districts and demand better. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Blood, you're recognized to speak.
Question.
The question's been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
25 ayes, 4 nays, cease debate, Mr. President.
Debate does cease. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to close. And waves. Members, the question is the motion to recommit. All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
6 ayes, 30 nays to recommit the bill, Mr. President.
The motion fails. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Bostelman would move to amend the committee amendments with AM 100.
Senator Bostelman, you're recognized to open.
Well, good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraska. I wasn't expecting it to come up quite so soon. AM 100 would strike Section 50 from AM 41, which sweeps the investment earnings from the Nebraska Universal Service Fund yearly. It's perpetual from here on out. Last session, LB 1413 also proposed a yearly sweeping of NUSF interest. However, after debate on the floor, we agreed to limit the sweeping of the funds to one-time transfer with Senator Michaela Kavanaugh's floor amendment, FA 254. We said no last year. You cannot sweep the funds into perpetuity into the future. You can this one time, but that's it. We're not doing that anymore. Let me repeat what I just said. Less than a few months ago, this body said no to sweeping these funds. Senator McKinney asked earlier, what's NUSF funds for? NUSF is funding comes from Nebraskans who pay monthly surcharge on their telephone bills under the NUSF program. The providers receive funding called ongoing support. This support is critical to the long-term sustainability of our broadband network. In rural areas of the state, as well as in our cities, where there are few customers, the cost of operating and maintaining the network far exceeds what any provider will receive in customer revenues. NUSF support is vital to fulfilling the high cost gap and to the long-term sustainability of our network. Currently, we are spending hundreds of millions of dollars through the Broadband Bridge Act, capital projects, BEAD, ACAM, and other programs, USDA, to expand access and affordability to broadband throughout the state by replacing aging copper networks with state-of-the-art fiber systems. Sweeping the investment earnings from NUSF funds seems counterintuitive when these funds are meant to be utilized to maintain and upgrade the same networks we are currently spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on to build out. If those networks weren't being built out, we would be using the NUSF funds for maintenance and upkeep of those that we're replacing now with modern systems. The Public Service Commission also has voiced legal concerns with the yearly sweeping of interest from the NUSF funds due to Nebraska's Supreme Court precedent. In Schumacher versus Johans, the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled that the NUSF surcharge is not an unconstitutional tax. It is not intended to raise revenue for governmental purposes. Rather, the surcharge is intended to regulate the telecom industry through a rebalance and restructuring of rates. Therefore, utilizing the Nebraska Universal Service Fund's interest to raise revenue is a legal gray area. I will say that there are several district courts that have brought down rulings on both sides of this. It's kind of gray areas we're talking about. It's probably will be resolved in the Nebraska or in the U.S. Supreme Court, but we have the opportunity now to ensure that all Nebraskans have the same opportunity to receive broadband, phone services, internet services, and that those, once they receive them, that they're maintained and kept at the level that they need to be retained and kept at. We do not currently, with all those programs we have right now, we do not have the funds to build out the entire network in the state of Nebraska as it is today. And these funds that we're sweeping can be used to assist and augment that build out. If you're worried about the $2 million that this is, now that will probably go down. And why do I say that $2 million is going to go down? Because it has gone up over the couple of years. The reason is we passed the bill again in this body that said, if you build out on these new projects, provider, when you build that out, you must certify by testing the system. You must certify that you're actually providing what it is you say you're providing at that location. Once you do that, then you get paid. That's part of what we're talking about right now, is these funds are part of that process. Economic development in rural Nebraska. And this is about economic development in rural Nebraska. Surprise, surprise, it's broadband. Senator Bosman's talking about broadband. That's critical to the state of Nebraska. The PSC said we have some potential legal concerns about forever sweeping interest out from the NUSF fund. Under Nebraska Supreme Court precedent, this could render NUSF potential an unconstitutional tax. Operational support and maintenance. This is not PSC language. Operational support and maintenance of broadband projects funded by state, federal, and county governments will be necessary after the capital expenditures are made. It would be a better policy to accumulate earnings in the fund to prepare for more ongoing support necessary in the future. Once again, we're building out hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to need those funds. Right now, they're not using that support because they have the money coming in from the federal government and state grants for that support, because we're replacing those areas, replacing those systems with state-of-the-art fiber, and other telecom services. We're doing that. So that's why that's building up. Once the build out is completed, I would expect those funds to be utilized fairly quickly. So and let me read here's from the court. It says, we conclude that the primary purpose of the NTUSFA is not to generate revenue for governmental purposes, but rather to regulate the telecommunications industry through the rebalancing and restructuring rates, which I said. The funding mechanism established by the NTUSFA enables the replacement of implicit subsidies with explicit subsidies in order to achieve universal service under the new competitive market environment brought about by the Telecommunications Act. The surcharge is imposed only on end user revenues from telecommunications services, and payments from the fund are made only to eligible telecommunications companies for the sole purpose of provisional maintenance and upgrading of facilities and service for 51, which is the support is intended. That's in 86-324 sub 1. Based upon our independent review, we conclude that the surcharge assessed by the PSC pursuant to the NTUSF is not a tax. If you're concerned about the $2 million and replacing the $2 million, I have a recommendation for that. Next year, when you come in, next session, currently membership or admission to or purchase by zoo or aquarium, their memberships are currently exempt from taxing. So that's about 1.4, 1.5 million in 26, 27 looking like. And then the cities actually get about $400,000+ with that also. So if you're worried about the dollars, there's your dollars. That's pretty easy. To me, that's a pretty easy fix. We can't do that this year, but that's what I'd recommend you do next year. This is important to me. I think it's important to all Nebraskans. Yeah, technically, maybe can you do it? But we said last year, or not even last year, we said this year, this last session, we said no. We said no. And now we're saying, well, yeah,
1 minute.
we need it. We got to do it. I would urge you to vote yes, green on AM 100, and I do then support AM 41 to LB3. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bostman. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciated the comments by Senator McDonald, and he made a comment about next year there'd be 500 bills introduced, and we normally get about 650 to 700, but because Senator Wayne and Senator McDonald won't be here, 500 will be the number because they do about 100 each. So I did listen to that. I heard it. So let me give you this. I just received a text and it said, vote no, epic or nothing, because 3% is nothing. So let me give you this little warning here. I may have voted yes for the last time on any of these three bills. Wow, wait a minute. You voted these out of appropriations, both of these. I did. But I didn't know that Senator Wayne felt exactly like I do. And I would guess that there are 3 or 4 more of you that feel the same way. But you're very uncomfortable making that announcement, so just vote that way. We vote these down, and then we have to make a tough decision about what really counts and what doesn't. And those of you who are seeking re-election are then going to have to make a hard decision, because right now you're pretty safe. But it's becoming very uncomfortable as we approach the end of the session and nothing gets done, or we have to change it and actually do something. So Senator McDonald asked, why can't we have bills brought to the floor for discussion? We have 3 separate branches of government. The judicial branch, the judges and us, the legislature, and the executive branch. And it seems like that this whole session we've been functioning on what the executive branch wants, and we haven't spent a lot of time determining and trying to negotiate what the legislative branch wants, because the executive branch said, you must do this. We, the legislature, decide what we do here, not the executive branch. I would suggest today that Governor Pillen is not happy with what we have now proposed to be the solution. That's my guess. I haven't talked to him, but I believe that to be the case. The majority of the Nebraskans today would agree with what Senator McDonald said earlier this morning. That's all? That's it? That's not enough. I agree with that. So you may find it very difficult for me to get a green vote on any of this stuff. I personally would rather go home with nothing than to continue to put a Band-Aid on an amputation that would lead people to believe there's actually going to be a solution come out of the legislature. That will never happen. In 1966, the voters took it upon themselves to fix the system, the whole system, by removing property tax for the state. And until the voters get to the place that they're frustrated enough that after 57 years, we haven't made a decision that counts for them, they may then put something on the ballot to force the legislature to do something they don't want to do, because we're not going to do anything that makes us uncomfortable. We don't want to have a discussion.
1 minute.
We don't want to talk about Senator Blood's bill. We surely don't want to talk about Senator Brandt's bill. And perhaps it's because of the people that introduced those two. They now know how I feel. We're in the same boat. But who loses in this whole process are those people watching at home and those people that pay the taxes. They're the losers. And how did they become the losers? Because we picked winners. And the winner is the government. And the losers automatically those who pay. A decrease in the increase. Vote no on these bills, and let's get back to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator McDonald, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, good morning, colleagues. Just wanted to start talking about some of the bills that I introduced and want you to consider as we go forward. One of the bills I introduced was the idea that after 40 years as your primary residency in the state of Nebraska, either one home or homes, a number of them, that you would no longer pay property tax. Large fiscal note. Thinking about finally having that one moment in your life after paying property taxes for 40 years that you could sit on your porch and honestly say that you own your home, that you are no longer paying rent to the state, to the government based on the idea that you're paying property taxes. And if you financially stumble, that your home that you've owned or homes cumulative, you'd be eligible. That's not going to be taken away from you. I want to have that discussion. Now, maybe people say, well, it shouldn't be 40 years. It should be 45. It should be 35. It should be, okay, well, let's have that discussion. I have another constitutional amendment that we had talked about last year. Valuations would be capped at 5%. 5%, up to 5%. Sometimes I think we get as a legislature, we start thinking, oh, there's 93 counties. I believe that Douglas County Board does a good job of trying to control spending. I've got some other ideas, but I've got people on that board that I can talk to that give me ideas. You've got the county assessor of Douglas County, Walt Peffer. You got PJ Morgan and other people are serving on that board. And we sat and we talked about what would be fair for those county commissioners looking at the valuation, and we came up with 5%. Now, if someone says that should be 4%, that should be 6%, okay, let's have that discussion. But that would be a vote of the people. That would be on the ballot for November 5th. Talking about a vote of the people, I introduced, that's currently sitting in Urban Affairs, came out last year, was on general file, voted out 7-0, was the idea of if you have a project and you're going to issue bonds for over 80 million, that size and scope of a project, you should have a vote of the people. Now, if you have funding coming from the federal government, from the state government, from the private sector, it doesn't count within that 80 million, which was somewhat confused. But at that point, you're spending that kind of money of $80 million. I think the people should have a vote. It's their money. I've heard people say, well, that's we're going to get that's through bonding. It's still the people's money. It's the taxpayers' money. I think they should have a chance to vote. Now, that was for metropolitan class cities. I really thought when it was introduced, and we've had this discussion over the years, people would say, oh, no, I want it throughout the state at X number of dollars adjusted for that community. Because the concept is we have the opportunity to educate the people on some of these large projects, give them the opportunity to weigh in, and then let their voice be heard at the ballot box based on if they want that project to go forward. There is so many bills that have been introduced out of the 81 that are just, I really believe are good bills and deserve an opportunity to come out of committee. And again, some of mine I know will not come out of committee. But I want the citizens of Nebraska to know that there's other ways we can help with the property tax issue currently in this special session. And outside of what we're trying to do with LB 34, that we have that opportunity. And I'd like you to encourage my colleagues, which I know there's one thing that is consistent amongst, I believe, my fellow senators is their work ethic. I've noticed that from any part of the state, east, west, north, south. People come down here to do the work. Now, I'm not saying that on days there's a number of places we all would rather be, and we would like to spend more time with family and friends and neighbors, but they're willing to make that sacrifice. And they are here and they are willing to do the work. I've disagreed with people over the years, but not based on their work ethic. Some of their ideas I disagreed with, but not based on their willingness to put the work in. I know we can make some improvements, and those are the three of the bills I wanted to discuss. I'm going to get back on the mic and talk about some of the other bills I've introduced. And one that we are going to discuss is based on, you stand on the porch, and this is currently happening with some people that are running for legislature, and the idea that a person will tell you that their husband died, their spouse
That's your
died.
time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Question.
The question's been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
25 ayes, 4 nays, cease debate, Mr. President.
Debate does cease. Senator Bostoman, you're recognized to close on AM 100.
Thank you, Mr. President. Broadband. That's the topic that I like to talk about for 8 years, broadband. So there's a couple things happening. We're talking about, a couple years, continue to do a couple years of this funding to get things up. Potentially, maybe the body would like to look at that if we only make this to 3 years, but I would encourage you at this point in time, and I think Senator Kay is one who is willing to drop that amendment to say through 2027 that we would do this, but then not after that. That would be end of it. That's a consideration you have. But I do feel strongly that this is a very important fund that we have out there. And my concern is that as we can build out the system throughout the state, that we don't have the supports needed to, one, continue to build out to meet those needs. But the other one is to maintain the systems that we have. So we have gone around for years. Let me tell you something, for years. I have fought NUSF with the telecoms, with the providers for years on this subject, right? Because we need to get the old copper systems replaced. We need to do that. It's critical, vital for our communities across the state to make that happen. And we did do that, actually, this last session. We actually made that difference made. ACAN has got a build out. Once that's done, copper is done with NUSF. What we need to make sure is that we have all the funding we can to finish the build out. Like I said, we have hundreds of millions of dollars coming to the state right now that allows this fund to grow because we're not replacing, we're not doing the maintenance, but we're replacing the entire system. So we need to be able to build that into the future. So perhaps the right answer is if the body would allow it for a couple of years till 27, and then it ends. But that's up to the body. Right now, I would ask for a green vote on AM 100 and AM 41 and LB 3. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Bostovan. Members, the question is the adoption of AM 100. All those in favor, vote aye. All those opposed, vote nay. There's been a request to place the House under call. Members, the question is, shall the House go under call? Record, Mr. Clerk.
26 ayes, 4 nays, place House under call.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. All those senators outside the chamber, please return and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senators Brewer and Dungan, please return to the chamber and record your presence. The House is under call. All unexcused senators are present. Senator Bostovan, the vote was open. Will you accept call-ins? Mr. Clerk.
Senator Dungan voting yes. Senator Hunt voting yes. Senator Von Gillern voting no. Senator Merman voting no. Senator Albright voting no. Senator Linehan voting no. Dick.
Record, Mr. Clerk.
21 ayes, 15 nays on the amendment, Mr. President.
The amendment fails. I raise the call. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would move to reconsider the vote on AM 100.
Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I hope you just sit in your seats for a minute. I'm just going to talk now. I'm going to get myself out of the queue so that we can go to a vote on this. I don't know that everybody was paying attention. We voted, 30 people voted to take out the permanent language in April. That language is reinstated in this amendment. And Senator Bosselman is just trying to go back to what we all passed in April to not obligate future legislatures to take money from the Universal Service Fund's interest. I don't know why only 21 people voted for that, but 30 people voted for it before, and actually some people voted for it today that didn't vote for it before. I pick a lane. Like, pick a lane. 30 people voted for my amendment. That's how important it was to this body. Because you all know you don't give me a vote unless it is hard fought. So please vote to reconsider, vote for Senator Bosselman's amendment, and let's move on to the next thing on the debate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Cavanaugh. Returning to the queue, Senator McKinney, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support the vote to reconsider. I don't think we should be moving any cash funds, but that's me. But I have some questions. Is Senator Von Gillern around? No? Okay. But I have some questions for him later. But I am curious. Somebody asked me this question on the side. So would Senator Clements yield to a question?
Senator Clements, will you yield?
Yes.
Quick question. I didn't know this answer. So with the 1107 funds, and if we front load it, if an individual hasn't claimed them for the past 2 years and this bill passes, will they be able to claw back that previous 2 years?
Yes, the statute of limitations on an income tax return is 3 years, and people can file amendments yet on their 23, 22, 21 tax returns.
Okay.
This will not stop that.
All right, thank you. Oh, another question. Are you on the Building and Maintenance Committee?
Yes.
Oh, good question. Well, I have a question for you. So how many times has the Department of Punitive Services come to your committee and requested funds for maintenance on the state penitentiary?
I'm not sure, but I've just been on the last 2 sessions because I'm appropriations. Senator Von Gillern is chair. He might know more, but I don't recall them coming to the committee myself.
Okay, thank you. Because, and I asked that because it's new to me today that the department could go to the Building Maintenance Committee and request funds for maintenance. I didn't know that. Maybe I should have known that, but I did know now. Hopefully I'll talk to Senator Von Gillern to see how many times they do come before the committee and request funds for maintenance and how much and what for, because I think we should know, and I would like to see if there's a report on what they asked for and what they've done with those resources. But again, I don't think we should be taking, just like we shouldn't be taking money from the Universal Service Fund because broadband needs to be expanded in rural communities and all resources are needed to do so. All resources are needed also to take care of the facilities that we are housing incarcerated individuals that are living in inhumane conditions, and we shouldn't be taking any money. So just like we shouldn't be taking money for broadband, we shouldn't be taking money for maintenance or facilities because it's needed. So I don't understand that. And the conversation about only revenue bills are only being heard and that's the priority of the call or property tax relief. The way I read the proclamation, it was super broad, and from my understanding, no bill that got introduced was ruled outside of the call. So no matter if a bill did not go to the Revenue Committee, all bills were in a call. So I think all bills should be able to be heard, and regardless of going to Revenue Committee, if they get voted out of their committees, they should be able to be heard on the floor. And if they're out, they're out. They should be considered because there are bills that are sitting in committees that would raise revenue for our state that would be very helpful instead of taking dollars from the people. That would also help renters, because we're not going to help renters, although we're here for a special session. We're not helping renters at all. We're helping
1 minute.
Property tax owners. And I would also like to know, of the unclaimed property tax credits that we keep talking about, what percentage of those unclaimed property tax credits are outside property owners? If somebody could please give me that data, I would greatly appreciate it. What percentage of the unclaimed property tax credits are of individuals that don't live within the state or are not owner-occupied residents? So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Clements, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I voted no on AM 100. The interest on the Universal Service Fund is part of the funding in LB3. And I looked up the balance of that fund. The last 5 years was 86 million, then 96 million, then 110 million, 133 million, and as of July 31st, $131 million. It receives $50 million of revenue per year from telephone bills. And it's been spending 27, 37, 35, 29, spending about 30 million of the 50 million coming in. So that's why I voted to include this in that transfer of interest. Also, there already is some of the Universal Service Fund interest being used for the 211 information system that originated from an Omaha nonprofit. So this would, this only transfers the excess over what's being used for the 211 as far as what I'm understanding. We have been discussing some compromises, and I'd be willing to sunset this provision June 30th of 2027 so that it would fund LB3 AM 41 as put out by the committee, but would have a sunset date in June of 2027 after 3 years so that the legislature could decide at that point. So, and if we're yeah, if we would vote no on this, we'd still be able to have an amendment to just limit rather than taking out completely. I would vote no on AM 100 and then support a 3-year sunset, either now or on select. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Clemens. Senator Mosier, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Nebraskans. Well, first of all, the motion by Senator Bosselman to preserve the USF fund, I support that. That fund is supposed to be for maintaining the phone network, and it's money that winds up subsidizing areas that are not economically feasible to continue or to build out phone service. And so to take that money in perpetuity to fund the property tax is, I think, wrong. So I'm going to vote to reconsider, and I did vote for that bill previously. The notion that this is only a 3% improvement in property taxes and that's not enough, so I'm going to get mad and I'm going to go home, going to stomp my feet, this isn't enough. Yeah, it's not enough, but it's something. And we'll keep trying until we can make substantial difference. Without having more revenue, there weren't a lot of places to go to find money to offset property taxes. It's just, only in Lake Wobegon, Garrison Keillor's fantasy world, can all the children be above average and all the women good looking. It's just, it's just, you can't reduce property taxes without having revenue to offset it. We can grow it a little bit at a time, is what we're trying to do, but we have a long way to go with that. Looking at the sheet that Senator Linehan handed out that showed the change in valuation in property tax valuation, I can't believe that people who live in Douglas County, or senators who represent Douglas County and Lancaster County, didn't all universally support the tax plan. In Douglas County, the valuations went up 27%. 27%. So if you're paying $5,000 in tax now, that's going to, in property tax, it's going to go up 27%. Why wouldn't we want to help those people? Now, the schools, if they get foundation aid, if the valuation goes up, they can't reduce their levy because they still don't have enough money, but they won't get TIOSA funds or help from the state. So that all falls on the taxpayers of Douglas County. So why did the senators from Douglas County not support this tax plan, or Lancaster County? Most of the more populated counties have increases in valuation. Buffalo, 2.3%. My county was less than 2%, just a little bit. But, I agree with Senator Wayne that we needed 4 or 5 more votes to get something done. But if that plan wasn't it, I'm willing to come back in January and try to come up with another plan to see what we can do to help people pay their property taxes. This is just crazy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Mosier. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm doing what's called I'm making up a name for it, like a delayed filibuster. I'm letting votes happen. I'm not going crazy and doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff, but we are going to take some time until, and maybe I understand there's some people who don't necessarily like me or get along with me. And so, and it's unfortunate because you have to think of everything on the floor. I'll give you an example. When Speaker Hildreth was here, Senator Groney had a bill for the rail spur projects, rural projects, I guess it was the act, the Rural Project Acts. And I had to schedule my North Omaha thing right after that. And I kept telling Speaker Hildreth at the time, I was like, you have to schedule me right after that. You have to, because I can make the argument, what's good for rural for 40 million is good for North Omaha for 40 million. And I can make the argument of where these will go in the populations. And I had to make some of those arguments on the floor, and then it just went through. Last year during Veterans Court, we had a conscious decision, and for me and others, to put Brewer's name on there, so it's Brewer's bill on the top of the floor. Because Wayne gets too much, or Wayne might have another deal, or this, and so it's just it's funny how much you have to think about. Not everybody does, but a lot of people have to think about how that board looks, who's on the board, and what order to even call a vote, that a lot of people don't have to think about. Take that for what it's worth, but when you think about bills, you should think about all of that. Who introduces it, how you vote on amendments, how those amendments are written, all of that factors in a different way depending on the mood of the body. So maybe I'm the wrong person to talk about it, but at the end of the day, facts are the facts. And we're going to do 400 million over 3 years. The first big chunk is 180 million. Then we actually drop down to 131, move back up to 140. So those 2 other years in the following are less than what we're doing this year, but I guarantee you valuations and property taxes are going to go up. So we actually have a little increase, and then we decrease for 2 years while property taxes are still going up. So it's truly a minus when you talk about the decrease in the increase. I want to mention that on what's been handed out is part of Senator Blood's CA, and look at some of the unfunded mandates just in Sarpy County alone. It's about 15 million. If you don't like Epic, or you do like Epic, let's back up. If you do like Epic and you can't get Epic there, this is how you force a conversation around Epic. You vote for the CA. You put it to the vote of the people, because all of the unfunded mandates will have to be paid for. So they're going to have a revenue conversation down here. After it's voted on, the people say yes. And that's when all the people with the Excel sheets and everybody comes out, and then Senator Erdman can say, if you're taxing 5.5% on the gross, and I'm trying to do just a one tax on the net, I think we're a little closer than you think. But we're gonna have to do something because the unfunded mandate constitutional amendment passes. The cost of unfunded mandates is huge. So we can dance around not having real property tax relief, or we can take up the CA and have a real debate on how much this state puts on its counties. And should that go to the vote of the people?
1 minute.
So Senator Blood, Government Committee voted out her CA, and it won't be scheduled because it didn't come from revenue. But I would argue that would have the biggest impact this election on people who want to go out and say, I want lower property taxes, and I want the state to stop putting it on the locals to carry this unfunded mandates and this burden. But I guarantee you people won't vote to let that be heard because they're scared of that conversation. It's funny, we're there for League of Municipalities and counties. When it comes to taxes, we want to listen to them about how we can't have caps. But they all signed off on this. But you won't listen to them on this. Because see, we find ways to navigate to make excuses of why we won't provide real relief.
That's your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Dorn, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lieutenant Governor. I know there's been some discussion about the bill that the amendment we just voted on, and some discussion about, thank you, Senator Clements, for bringing up what you brought up, that we probably will have a vote on that again sometime. Wanted to talk about a few things this morning, been listening to a lot of the discussion, Senator Wayne, other people. 3%, I guess you could call it a 3%. That's what we're going to end up with. It's 186 million. That's what we're going to end up above what would have been. We would have had 565 million. We're going to have 750 million, and that'll be 34. That's, I call it one side of the equation. I always look at the whole equation though. Several people brought up, the last I've heard is about 25% of the people don't claim that 565 million. About 25% of the money hasn't been claimed each year. That's another 140 million. Senator Wayne, in your district, and I think most of your districts in OPS, this comes from the governor's staff. 60% of those people haven't been claiming it. So 40% of your people will see a 3% increase. 60% of those people, though, will also be receiving all of that 565 million. They're going to be receiving the whole amount, probably a 10 to 12 to 15%. I don't know what percent it is. So yes, we do have that statewide. It's 3% more is going in there. But in certain districts, Lincoln Public School system, 52% of the people weren't claiming they all be 1107s. I don't know if those numbers are right. Those are numbers we're hearing. The latest number I have heard is all that 25% of the people statewide, 140 million is not being claimed. Myself, I claim it every year. I will be only collecting maybe a 2 or 3% increase. Does this affect me much? No, it won't affect me much. Not much at all. But that's why we're down here to do some of that work. I do agree very much with what Speaker Arch said this morning. This is a process, and he laid this out very good at the start of the session. He's talked about it several times during this. We have a process here where we're going to go by the bills that are outlined. We're going through those first. He was very specific in saying, and he's repeated it 3, 4, 5 times, any other bill that you want scheduled, we can do after that. I will say this from my personal feelings. The longer you keep us here, the less likely I am here to stay longer for a discussion on some other bills. Let's get through these things. Let's vote on these bills. Let's vote on these amendments. Let's get through and vote this thing up or down instead of having these filibusters, what we have all the time, and taking the 8 hours on discussion, then the 4 hours. It just drags this out, and it wears on Senator Wayne, it wears on us, it wears on me. I go through the emotions of, I'm not staying here any longer. I might stay here longer. All I can tell you is, once we get through this, I will stay here longer to have any of those discussions on those other bills. Thank you much, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Senator Dorn. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate the opportunity again to bring to the attention of those in the room that are listening, the three of you. Did you get that, the three of you? Okay. So I may start calling people out by individual, asking them to yield to a question. This might be the question. Are you okay with 3% reduction in property tax? If not, what is your solution? How do you explain to the people when you go home that you had a win, you got 3% reduction? That would be a very uncomfortable conversation. But that's one, maybe it's a rhetorical question that you ponder to yourself. And once you've done that, then the decision that you and yourself made and your imaginary friend, if you have one, then you have to make a decision how we go forward. And I'm not sure what's going to happen. I'm not sure how we're going to negotiate something other than what we have in front of us. But I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not leaving here with a 3% reduction as a win. The epic consumption tax is in the Revenue Committee. Could be voted out. I offered a solution earlier, an attempt to phase it in over time, which we've never done before. As I said yesterday, got zero support from anybody except Senator Hardin made a suggestion. As I said earlier, we are the legislature and we can do whatever we desire to do if we get 25 votes. So let's stay here and do the work. And if it takes all next week, so be it. I'm already missing picking sweet corn. And for those of you who got sweet corn in the last couple of days, you would probably suggest that we ought to adjourn or recess until next week so I can go home and get some more. The point is this. You have to decide who sent you here. And if you're here to protect sovereign immunity and eminent domain and all those things of the government, I understand that. That's who sent you here, the government. That's not who sent me here. It was those voters of the 47th district. And why did they do that? I believe they did that because I told them I was going to work on property tax relief. And I would assume everybody in this room had that on their card. How many bills, how many ideas did you come with to solve that issue? And if I had a show of hands, it'd be a very small number. But we keep nibbling around the edges, and we keep saying we did something. So I am now to the point that I don't give a rip if we pass anything, okay? So I will not be voting for anything going forward. 34, LB 1, 2, 3, whatever you got. I'm out. So if you have 33 without me, great. If you don't, you're not going to make it. So you decide.
1 minute.
You decide how you're going to do this. But it's going to be without me. Because when I go home, I'm not going to be blamed for giving a decrease to the increase. I'd rather be blamed for getting nothing. I'd rather be accused of standing up for those who sent me here than to give in and allow this insignificant reduction to be a solution. It is not a solution, and you that are running for re-election are going to find that out. So you may not get reelected for your vote if we do something significant, but I can tell you this, if you don't vote at all for something significant, you will lose as well. This is a defining moment in your legislative career. Do something that counts. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Senator McDonald, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Erdman. The idea of where did some of these bills come from that we introduce, 99% of the time it comes from a constituent, from someone telling you their story, and most of the time the stories aren't positive. And how can we do something to positively affect their lives? So go back to the 5% on the idea of the constitutional amendment that the valuation would be capped at 5%. That came from a person that had lived in their home for 58 years. Their valuation, maintained their home, no improvements. Valuation went up 35%. And they asked, do I need to sell my only vehicle to pay the difference now in my property tax? There's another bill that I introduced. A number of people helped, worked on it. The idea of the homestead exemption and the range of who's eligible. Over the years, we've used CPI. Wanted to switch that to HPI, House Price Index. Why does that make such a difference? Because if you look over the last 10 years, it's gone up about 30% with CPI. HPI would go up 90% to expand the range. So more people are eligible based on the homestead exemption. You have people that have told their story. Originally, there's people out knocking for legislature, and then this got back to me, and these individuals where they were just barely outside of the range. So then they had to make the decision because a number of them had lost their spouse, therefore their pension had stopped, their revenue went down, but not enough to make them eligible for the homestead exemption. These people aren't talking about selling their car. They're saying, I have no choice but to sell my home. So you think about that American dream, you think about how we want to get people the opportunity to be a homeowner and what all that means. I'm second generation. Prior to my father, we always rented. But that was his dream after serving in World War II, was to come home and be the first of his family to own a home. And he did it, him and my mother. Worked very hard. Spent their whole life, well, 2 houses, but the idea that all the memories, everything that went with that home and what it meant to them. Again, getting back to the one day where you could finally sit on your porch and not be partners and not owe rent to the government in the form of property tax. How about just be able to hang on to it? So we talk about we can wait, and I really just disagree with the strategy of if we wait till January, we have more time. No, you don't. You do not have more time in January. Now, is this more time sensitive because our class of at least 15 of us aren't going to be back? It's more time sensitive because the citizens of Nebraska need our help now. This isn't just something where, hey, I've got to pay a little bit more and it's okay and my disposable income won't be the same. No, these are people losing their homes. So I talked the other day about what are we going to do for our kids, our grandkids? How does the state look going forward? How does the state look tomorrow? The next day? And I know you're sincere about trying to work on this in January. I know you're sincere today, but it is time sensitive and we have to have that sense of urgency. We have to make sure the citizens know that we are, again, I'm supporting LB3, I'm supporting LB34, and that's been work, and it's been something.
1 minute.
Again, as told me this morning, not enough. Also, I appreciate Senator Bostelman. The 8 years we've served together, here he is trying to work on Amendment 100. We talked about the 211 system, through the United Way of the Midlands, for the whole state, east, west, north, south. And that assistance line, how many people it helps. He's working on right now a way to make sure that that funding stays in LB3, and I appreciate his work. I know we can get there. There's talent in this room, and I've seen it. There's so many good ideas. I know we can get there this session. Now, is it going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. We're human beings, and we're never going to be perfect. Our legislation will never be perfect, but I know we can make a big step forward for the citizens of our state with true sustainable property tax relief. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Senator Bostelman, you're recognized to speak.
Question.
The question has been called. Do I see 5 hands? I do. The question is, shall debate cease? All those in favor vote aye. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Kirk.
27 ayes, 1 nay to cease debate.
Debate does cease. Members, the question is the motion to reconsider. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know how many people are in here, so I'm trying to decide if I should do a call of the House or not. But thank you again to Senator Bostelman for bringing this motion. This is reinstating the language that this legislature agreed upon and voted on in April in the budget. All this does is not commit future legislatures to taking the interest from the Universal Service Fund. That doesn't mean that we can't decide next year to not take it. It just means that we are not bound to do it. It's not a permanent change, which is something that we're not supposed to do through appropriations. And I just want to say there were 30 people who voted for this fix in April, and today, there were 6 additional people that voted for it. So, colleagues, we should have 36 votes for this. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's just do it and move on to whatever the next thing is. Thank you, Mr. President. I think maybe a roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Members, the question is the motion to reconsider. There's been a request for a roll call vote. Mr. Clerk.
Senator Aguilar. Voting no. Senator Albright. Voting no. Senator Arch. Voting no. Senator Armendariz. Senator Ballard. Voting no. Senator Blood. Voting yes. Senator Boston. Not voting. Senator Bostar. Voting yes. Senator Bostelman. Voting yes. Senator Brandt. Voting yes. Senator Brewer. Voting yes. Senator John Kavanaugh. Voting yes. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Voting yes. Senator Clements. Voting no. Senator Conrad. Voting yes. Senator Day. Senator DeBoer. Voting yes. Senator DeKay. Not voting. Senator Dorn. Voting no. Senator Dover. Senator Dungan. Voting yes. Senator Erdman. Voting no. Senator Frederickson. Senator Holleran. Voting no. Senator Hansen. Voting no. Senator Hardin. Voting no. Senator Holcroft. Voting no. Senator Hughes. Voting yes. Senator Hunt. Voting yes. Senator Ibaugh. Voting no. Senator Jacobson. Voting no. Senator Kauth. Voting no. Senator Linehan. Voting no. Senator Lippincott. Voting no. Senator Lowe. Voting no. Senator McDonald. Voting no. Senator McKinney. Voting yes. Senator Meyer. Voting no. Senator Mosier. Voting yes. Senator Merman. Voting no. Senator Raybold. Voting yes. Senator Reapy. Not voting. Senator Sanders. Voting no. Senator Slama. Voting yes. Senator Vargas. Voting no. Senator Von Gillern. Voting no. Senator Walls. Voting yes. Senator Wayne. Voting yes. Senator Wishart. Voting no. Vote is, Senator. Senator Boston, I'm sorry, voting yes. Senator Reapy voting yes. Senator Ballard voting yes. Senator Jacobson voting yes.
Record, Mr. Clerk.
22 ayes, 22 nays to reconsider, Mr. President.
The motion is not adopted. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh would move to offer AM 107.
Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you're recognized to
Are
open.
we going to, yeah. Yes, I would like to replace.
I have a note that she would withdraw that and substitute FA 132.
Actually,
Without objection, it is withdrawn. So ordered.
AM 115.
She would withdraw and substitute AM 116.
Without objection, it is withdrawn. Substituted. Without objection, it is substituted. So ordered. Senator Kavanaugh, you're recognized to open.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, that was another Profiles and Courage for this body. Honestly, I'm too despondent to talk about any of this with any of you anymore. I had to file the amendment to do the compromise that, whatever, I guess. So I yield my time to Senator Bostelman.
Senator Bostelman, you have 9 minutes, 34 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh. Colleagues, what we have is there is an amendment. The amendment she has is a compromise language we worked out with Senator Clements, our telecoms, those on the floor, myself. What the amendment does basically is secures the 2-in-1 funding through the time that was in question, because there was question after 2025 2-in-1 funding was going to be there, but this secures, makes sure that is there. And it also returns of funds after 27 back to NUSF. So it ends in 2027. So I fully support this. I would ask for your support as well. Again, I want to thank Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, Senator DeBoer, others, Senator Kay, others who have worked with us, Senator Conrad, Senator Clements, others that we worked on this to get this done. I do believe the amendment is good as it is. I would kindly ask for your support of AM 116 and then the underlying amendments and bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bostoman. Senator Conrad, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield my time to Senator Slama.
Senator Slama, you have 4 minutes, 55 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Conrad. I rise today in probably not as rare of occasion that I do agree with Senator Erdman. He is making quite a bit of sense. The wheels are falling off this special session, and they are falling off of this special session fast. We are so past being capable as a legislature of passing a bill with 33 votes that makes any sizable impact for property taxpayers. The frantic deals that are getting made this morning aren't thought through, they're not vetted, and we're going to do more long-term damage to this state than good. I'm with Erdman. I'm off advancing everything at this point. The next time I'm hitting my green button for something that is not an amendment, it's probably going to be for sine die, because this special session has passed its useful life as of this morning. Thank you, before I hand over my time, I'd like to see if Senator DeBoer would yield for a question.
Senator DeBoer, would you yield?
I would.
Fantastic. Is there anything you'd like to say?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I would like to say a few things. How thoughtful of you to ask. So what we have here in AM 116 represents a kind of a compromise which says that we shouldn't be taking all of the money into perpetuity from the NUSF interest, recognizing that when we build out very rural broadband, there's going to be an obligation on the state to keep it going. Fiber is a future-proof technology. You hear that a lot, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have to be repaired. So when we build out all these hundreds of millions of dollars of technology and we have this asset which the state has invested in, we got to make sure that it's able to be kept going. And it's not going to break in 10 years. It's going to start breaking immediately because people have accidents, because rodents get into things, because whatever it is. And the little plastic doohickey, which I can never remember the name of, that goes between this and that, those things fail. So we're going to have to be able to support keeping our broadband infrastructure going. That's what the NUSF fund is for. And it's going to need to get bigger over time. So in the next 3 years, we've had some excess the last couple of years. In the next 3 years, okay, maybe we can take the hit to the fund, but after that, we're going to need it. And the kind of ironic thing here is that this is Senator Michaela Cavanaugh's amendment. It was her amendment in the spring, and she lives in the city. City people don't get benefited from the NUSF fund. You know who gets the benefit of the NUSF fund? It's rural. See, Senator Cavanaugh's been on this committee for 6 years, so she understands because we hear it time and time again. Like Senator Bosselman, who's been on the committee for 8 years, she's a subject matter expert in this area, and she knows that we need this fund, and we need this fund to be there for this asset. Because if we end up with stranded assets, unusable because we can't keep them repaired, then what are we spending all this money for? To help rural Nebraska. This is a vote which everybody agrees now, as far as I understand, everybody I've talked to agrees. Senator Clements said, if we just need it for 3 years, and then after that, you can have it back in the NUSF fund. This is a vote for rural Nebraska, because I believe in helping rural Nebraska, even though I'm an Omaha senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator DeBoer. Senator McKinney, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I support AM 116. But if we're working under the conversation that what are we spending all this money for? Why are we trying to take all this interest money away? Before we go to lunch, I would like to say I do have another floor amendment. I think it's AM 131, which strikes the section to take away the interest money from the Correctional Facility Cash Fund and Correctional Industries, because you all voted to spend a lot of money to build a prison. Y'all also don't want to close the Nebraska State Penitentiary, because I tried to get it demolished multiple times and I didn't have the support to get it demolished. So that means you all want to keep it open and operational. It currently has a water main issue that's not being addressed. So since you all have committed to spend a bunch of money on corrections, why are we just, if we're working under the same premise about why are we spending all this money, we shouldn't take the money away. It's very important. Let's work within the premise of humanity and being humane and making sure people that this state has decided to incarcerate, and in some cases over incarcerate, and in a lot of cases not give second chances to, let's make sure that the conditions that they're living within are humane, and we should not be taking away the funds to make sure these facilities are properly managed, and making sure that the facilities don't have water main issues, make sure the upkeep is right. So no funds should be taken away corrections, because this body in this state likes to build prisons, likes to over incarcerate people, doesn't like to give people second chances. Also, people in this state don't think people who have been incarcerated shouldn't vote anymore, because we passed a bill in April and the Secretary of State and the Attorney General decided that was unconstitutional. And maybe, what is it, next week on the 20th, those people get a pardon. But even the people who would have got their rights restored won't be able to vote, because they'll have to wait 2 years, some of them. So since this state is in the business of incarcerating people, not giving people second chances, not caring about the humanity of these people, we should bare minimum make sure that the facilities are properly managed and are humane. So if we're saying the dollars for the Universal Service Fund are needed for rural Nebraska because we need to take care of rural Nebraska, we need to take care of the people that are housed in the facilities that we decided to house them in, that some people think they should be housed in for the rest of their lives and not be provided second chances. So as you go to lunch, because I'm not sure if it'll come up by the time we go to lunch, I want y'all to think about that. We should not take any dollars away from corrections, because we need to make sure that the facilities are humane. Because although you don't want to demolish NSP, although you voted to build a $350 million facility, and we're not talking about operations, you need to take care of that facility, because the department has deferred maintenance for 10 plus years and it keeps having problems. So why are y'all trying to take away this money?
1 minute.
Yes, the department can go to the building maintenance committee and request funds, but if they have $10 million left over for operations, why aren't we telling them to reallocate that to take care of the maintenance? Why do they have to go request money from the building maintenance committee when they can just reallocate $10 million? Why are we taking away $100,000 that could be used for maintenance? It just doesn't make any sense. So as you go to lunch, make sure you think about AM 131. Since we're thinking about why are we spending all this money, we need to take care of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Blood, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President, fellow senators, friends all. I stand in support of Senator Kavanaugh's amendment and in support of the appropriations bill once that is amended into it. I handed out, as usual, information on unfunded mandates, and I see that many of you have not even bothered to take the time to look at it, which is very telling. I have to disagree a little bit with Senator Wayne in the fact that what happens is this goes to a vote of the people, and the vote of the people are being asked, should we pass any bills unless we can first prove how we're going to pay for them? That gives us the opportunity to talk to our political subdivisions, find out if it's a necessary cost, and if so, how can it be paid for before we pass legislation like that? Seems pretty simple and seems pretty logical. And I traveled all over Nebraska talking about this, and I can tell you not a single person in all of your districts said this was a bad idea. They were very, very excited. Now we're being told that we only have a limited amount of time to get done what we need to get done. Well, let's look back to 2 years ago when we rushed around and shoved a bunch of stuff into these bills and made giant omnibus bills. When we had to get stuff done, we got it done. If we could stop filibustering, start putting some real energy towards what needs to be done, not only could we pass what's necessary for revenue, but we can get 3 legislative resolutions passed to get them on the ballot to let the people have a say. If you do not believe me that unfunded mandates are the core reason for property taxes being so high, in Sarpy County, it's 15% of our budget, over $100 million. $100 million that you put on the political subdivisions, you guys, and those who came before you. If you can't believe what's in black and white, pick a name. Senator Deb Fisher, Governor Ben Nelson, Senator Sue Crawford, Senator Justin Wayne, Senator Carol Blood, Governor Jim Pillen. If you can't find one person in that group you like, you're probably just not a very nice person. But surely you can find one person in that group that you like. And every single person in that group has either brought forward legislation, done an interim study, done both, or talked about it when they stumped. Governor Pillen talked about it at his town hall in Cass County. It was in the media, which is how I've learned about what was going on here, in the media. Governor Ben Nelson had multiple studies and said this would forever impact property taxes. Heck, he even went and preached that at the federal level as well, but that has nothing to do with today. We can get gambling on the ballot. Let the people have a voice. We can get Senator Brandt's bill on the ballot. We can get Senator Blood's bill on the ballot, and we can pass the revenue bill. Because it's my understanding that we're going to adjust, and maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, the caps, so we can make it so it's actually easier for our political subdivisions to do their jobs, which I'm all for. We can move this forward. We can move this fast. And then we can go home by Sunday so we can go to church or mass.
1 minute.
Or take a nap, whatever you do on Sundays, or golf. But gosh, let's get to work. People aren't at their desks. People aren't working. They're meandering around. They're talking. Some of them are making deals. I know many of you have not read what's been put on your desk. Take a minute, have your staff call your county board members. Have them call your school board members. Have them call your mayors. And I guarantee you, there is not one single political subdivision who's going to say it's not a big deal. So let's stop this once and for all. Let's create good property tax relief for the future. That's what we're doing. We're putting that welcome mat out. And let's steer next year's legislature in the right direction, because you guys get to decide what this looks like moving forward once that's been passed on the ballot. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Blood. Senator Wayne, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. So what's interesting is everybody's saying, Justin, you're leading this filibuster. Senator Wayne, you're leading a filibuster. There's a whole lot of other people talking that I have not went around and said, I mean, it's amazing that I get blamed for so much on the floor, but at the end of the day, people are actually starting to have conversations around 3% maybe isn't enough. So I'm going to give you 3 clear options of what I see a plan. We can stay where we are with LB 34, but at least at a minimum, I'm still not going to support it at a minimum, but at least at a minimum, do LB 34 correctly. That means as the credit is dispersed, we can change where that credit goes. We can carve out in a credit owner occupied. That has nothing to do with his constitutional amendment. It's a credit that we decide where it goes. We can do 100% to ag, 100% to the homeowner. We can do 100% to even renter who owns rental property. We can cut the property tax credit by 50% to corporations. They only get 50% of the credit if they get the credit. There's things we can do within the 3% to at least make it better. Option 2, we find out some exemptions we actually agree on. Unfortunately, when we got the first draft and a list of exemptions, it's a whole list of exemptions and nobody really had time to figure out what we agree and what we don't agree on. In a little bit, I'll be passing out at least the exemptions I can live with. And my exemptions, and I actually went through it last night. I went through it with some people. I shot them over some text messages, people I trust, and these exemptions don't necessarily hit working class and poor. It's the people who probably own property like landscaping and pools and things like that. Have that real conversation. Like, what's wrong with that? And if we were to include some of those exemptions and then talk about some of these sins tax, I think there's plenty of movement. Maybe leave out popping candy because that seems to be very controversial. I think we can actually jump up to a 15 to 20% property tax relief package. That doesn't include gambling, doesn't include some other things. I think if we were to have those conversations, and I keep hearing, if we do this, 6 senators fall off and you got to find another 6. Who are those 6 senators? Let's have that conversation. And if we want to really build option 3, where we actually deliver about 40% property tax relief, that's actually fundable. People just don't like the idea. We can pause the corporate and individual rate for 1 year. 1 year, 250 million, just 1 year. So you extend it out for the full 3.99 isn't in 28, it takes effect in 29, 1 year is 250 million. And you can actually target people starting in 2025 with their relief. But we can't have that conversation because 6 senators are going to fall off on corporate. Why? It's corporate 1 year pause. We're not taking it out. We're not stopping it. And I'll tell you the reason why I think we should do it is because the next legislature in 2028 is going to have to make a critical decision. Hear me out and hear me clear. 2028, that legislature, by extending it out 1 year, has to make a critical decision. Corporate tax rate cuts versus incentives. Which one are we going to fund? Because I always heard we have to have incentives because our corporate tax rate is too high. Well, our corporate tax rate will be effective that year going into the next year at 3.99. So do we still need incentives? That's $1 billion savings. That conversation has to happen in 2028. And that's how you line it up to make sure it happens. This ain't complicated. We just got to have real conversations. I feel like going back to a Goonies reference, I got a text about this. You know, when the governor, and I forgot his name, when the governor made the call, he made it real late at night, and all I could think of is the Goonie guy who was standing up saying, "Hey, you guys." And we all started running. Didn't know where we were running to. We just ran. We can make a difference today, guys. Let's have a real conversation. And I'm not filibustering yet. These amendments, I'm allowing voting up and down and everything else. I think people are talking because they're a little frustrated. Maybe we should listen. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Senator Erdman, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I always enjoy listening to Senator Wayne. He has a little humor in what he talks about. There is a solution to all of these things that Senator Wayne has alluded to. And we have this misconception that corporations pay taxes. People pay taxes. But when this all started out with income tax, people used to have to write a check. And then someone had a great idea that they would do withholding. And people don't know how much they pay. Then they wanted to raise taxes and they said, that will make people upset, so let's tax these evil corporations. And people said, yes, let's do that. So that's where we're at here. So if you want to fix the property tax, income tax, corporate income tax system, you need to eliminate it and start over. Start over with a tax that people can pay when they have the money to buy something that they consume or a service they hire for their own use. We have that plan. We've discussed it. We've talked about it. We've written about it. No one reads it. It's the only solution there really is. But we want to have a discussion about that. It would save the state, after it was fully implemented, about $1 billion a year savings, cutting spending. And that's what we've always been told, how you lower taxes is cut spending. So that's what it does. The Imagine Act, Nebraska Advantage Act, LB 773, before that, TIF financing, all of those things would go away. And Senator Wayne is exactly right. The I can't imagine how your taxes are going to be now act will sunset in 28. Then you'll have a decision to make. Do we continue to play in that game with all the other states that have incentives, or do we get to the front of the line and all those other states follow our lead? Well, many have said, hey, wait. We can't be the only state to have a consumption tax. And I say, why not? We're the only state to have complete public power. Don't seem to be a problem for us. We have the best rates in the nation. We have the only unicameral in the nation. Doesn't seem to be a problem for us. A lot of people think it's a good idea. So the reason we have all these incentives is because our taxes are too high. That's one reason. The other reason is other states have them, so we have to. So if we actually fix our broken system and others try to compete with something or a state that doesn't have taxes like they do, how do they do that? They follow your lead. That's how they do that. So let's have a consumption how to put the taxpayer in first place. Senator Kay, your district then would have people move back there. The young people would come back to the ranch and to the farm because they could afford to have them come back because they would decide how much taxes they pay. You talk about economic boom in the state, that's it. That is it. But we try to incentivize businesses to come here by charging other people more taxes so we can give them a break. How about we do this? Let's bring EPIC to the floor. Let's have a discussion about it. Help me understand how we should implement it so it's correct. Help me write the distribution plan so it comes back to those small communities. Everybody gets the money they should have. But let's make a real decision. I don't think Senator Slama and I are the only two that are going to vote no. I think as the day wears on and we speak about these things, the longer we do, I would hope the more it makes sense with you that are in this room and those of you watching. Because there's only one solution, and that's to eliminate these taxes and put the taxpayer in first place. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Erdman. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, an item first. The Revenue Committee chaired by Senator Linehan reports LR2CA to general file. Additionally, the Exec Board will have an executive session in room 2102 upon recess. Exec Board exec session, room 2102 upon recess. Finally, a priority motion. Senator Brandt would move to recess the body until 1:00 p.m.
Members, you have heard the motion to recess. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The legislature is in recess.